Great. Let's just start with an introduction. So thanks, Norman, for joining us today. And actually, I would love for you just maybe to give an introduction about your company and your process and your practice that you've been practicing since at least 1983, which is when you had told me that you moved into your current studio by Gilman.
Yes, I was in Emeryville before that. So now I have some biographical information on my websites. I don't know if you read that, but basically, after graduating college, I came to Berkeley and started just wandering around and thinking about how to support myself. And it was a very counterculture environment at the time. And about the last thing that anyone wanted to do was go out and get a job. Because it was very anti-establishment feeling at that point.
As it should be.
We used to say that, you know, did you hear about so-and-so? They sold out. Got a job. In any case, I was also in the position where I felt that if I got a job, I wouldn't have time to enjoy myself. I wanted to have more work-life balance. So I just started making jewelry and selling it on Telegraph Avenue. And that was, I was able to work part of the year and keep on going with that. But this is where the history of science came in, that some of the influences I mentioned, like Bronowski, brought up the fact that there were such interesting old instruments, such as the Astrolabe, and I just wanted one. So I went around and asked people, like, you know, how do I cast such an item? And they told me basically, very difficult to do, couldn't be done. They didn't have the equipment for it. But the people I knew that had casting equipment, it was the only casting equipment I had access to. So I just experimented with it until I was able to get it to happen, because I didn't know how else to proceed. Wow. And that really helped as far as my other products too, because it gave me access to different markets that I wouldn't have been able to get into otherwise, because people found the Astrolabe fascinating and very different. And I found that a lot of artist markets were very closed. Like they would have, like a given art show would only have so many openings for jewelers. And right. So, and they were already full. So no new jewelers could come in. But I found that with the Astrolabe, all of a sudden, there was entree. So many of the shows that I do, I got in with the Astrolabe and slowly brought in jewelry. Whereas if I would have started with the jewelry, they would have said, no, already full in that category.
What about your process of learning how to make the Astrolabes in the first place? And then how has that evolved today? Are you still using the same practices to do that?
Well, I did it all with the old-fashioned way, with paper and pen and ink, and it was all drawings. But today, most people probably do it all on computer. And I did do some Fortran programs that I tried, and I was able to duplicate a lot of the drawings for the Astrolabes. The printers I used at the time for that Fortran, they made it the lines were kind of squiggly. They weren't as good and clean lines as you know, drawing them with the compass. But I really wasn't able to find information on how to design the Astrolabe. That took a process of years. I started with the Rare Books Library at Cal and got their books on the Astrolabes out and basically copied the old ones. But over a period of several years, I was able to refine my technique and come up with more accurate drawings. So there were several series at the beginning of more and more accurate Astrolabes.
So was I correct in understanding that the first one you were actually able to have and hold and physically touch was one that you cast yourself? You had to actually create that?
Yes, because they're museum pieces and they're rare. And when you do go to museums, they're all behind glass. You can't handle it.
What a
So, yeah.
story. That's
So,
just amazing, because it's so perfect, since it's this esoteric knowledge. I mean, by definition, that's how it was even when they were doing it originally. And then you had to rediscover it by peering into these books and copying, and eventually were able to hold it. That's just amazing.
And they look amazing. They look exactly like you would see actually in these historical pictures of when they were making them. So are all of these, where's the one that you maybe value the most, and where does the origin of the astrolabe come from? And were you into it just because of its significance to the cultures that it was a part of, or was there some type of additional meaning to you for why you wanted one of them?
well, one thing I was astounded by that in engineering school, I graduated in engineering, and I was really surprised that in all that engineering curriculum, there was no history involved, so that I was able to graduate in a technical field and really didn't know about the history of science and the history of way back when. And so when I saw Bronowski's series, I think his quote was that the astrolabe was the slide rule and stopwatch of the world.
Wow.
And that really struck me, that it was such a significant instrument, and even in the sciences, which I'd taken, it was never mentioned.
Yeah, that is just puzzling.
Is a deeper meaning of, so I mean, I think they're amazing and visually stunning. I have no idea how I would even go about understanding what the meaning of them is, other than, you see like the sundial or something along those lines. Do you have expertise now on understanding the significance of how they're calculated? And then is there a digital equivalent to them in order to understand kind of their meaning? That would be my assumption right now, is that the current science and data that we have is similar to what the astrolabe does, except obviously not as visually stunning. Would that be correct? Or is there more significant meaning in the device itself than the information we have? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the astrolabe was able to be devised because they were able to project three-dimensional space onto two-dimensional flat surface, such as paper. And until the Greek school in Alexandria, that hadn't been accomplished. So one story about the astrolabe is that the three-dimensional globe with the arms, not a solid globe, but the three-dimensional globe is called an Armillary Sphere for the arms, where you've got an arm, which is the Tropic of Cancer, another arm is the equatorial line, and another is Tropic Capricorn. So one of the makers of the armillaries got frustrated with his creation. He threw it down on the floor, jumped up and down on top of it, and flattened it, and created the first astrolabe. That's taking the three-dimensional form and squashing it down into a two-dimensional form.
Amazing.
And so this is where Derek Price's ideas of how that school in Alexandria got started, all the inputs, and that it wouldn't have been possible without the conquests of Alexander the Great.
Right, getting access to Babylonian mathematics.
Right, and that was the seed. Derek Price's idea. That was the seed that led to today's science. And Bronowski didn't cover that aspect of it. He didn't go back that far. But Bronowski's thesis was all about the technological process and history in our Western culture.